Welcome, welcome. This is the Enlightenment Podcast, part of the Authors on Air Global Radio Network. And I'm your host, Lauri Schoenfeld. Thank you for all of those who are joining us live and for those who will join us later on the replay. I am very excited to talk to our guest today, Catherine Saykaly-Stevens. And I feel like I might have still slaughtered them. Sorry, Catherine.
All good.
We're going to be talking to her all about her business, the networking web, as well as why communicating clearly is important. Welcome, Catherine. So thrilled to have you here today.
It's a pleasure to be here with you. And if we can just get a couple of great insights to your listeners and followers, everybody's going to be able to pump their September up in 2021.
Yes to that. I'm cheering right here for those who are listening. We're cheering with our arms, like yes to all the goals and moving forward. So let's start with who you are right now and what you're up to in the world.
Well, what I'm up to with this great blank background is moving. In fact, we just got an offer on the house an hour before the call, which is triggering this whole crazy event. So there might be a little noise today. So apologies for that. But I'm calling or contacting you in this great empty space, beside a little end table right here. And you know what? Even in chaos, amazing things can happen to your online, to your offline. You want to prepare a little bit because sometimes you need to leave your house for 2 hours because strangers are going to come through it, and you have to clean, and you have a business to run. So that pre-planning in the beginning helps you to manage when you have those unknown times when you have to be called away from work too.
Congratulations. We're clapping for Catherine on the new transition that you are currently walking through. May there be a lot of beautiful things moving you to that new space.
Thank you.
Why did you start the networking web? What got you first hooked into moving in that direction?
It's a long story, so I'm going to do my best to keep it nice and short. In 1993, just before the internet made its step out, I was on Freenet. I was a coder. I made some of Canada's earliest websites. Now, they were really simple. I mean, it was basically as gray as my background with a line, a picture, a line, and that was it. But it was the start of something, and I felt like I was very lucky to be on the precipice, and one of the only women at the time. Now it's so beautifully mixed. Everybody's doing online, and it's wonderful, but it wasn't. It was very techy, and it was mostly male, and that has changed. And I got to be at the beginning. I've got to see it change over the while, and I actually like the change. I think it's exciting when there's new things that are happening, but today it's happening at a faster and faster rate. So there was a time when, hey, if it's online, I can do everything, but then it's specialized. Then it broke into pieces and it specialized again. And I think we need to realize we can't be all things to all people. I work with content. I work with even making content pieces. I specialize in LinkedIn rather than all social media. And even though many of us in marketing, people see us as all competition, we're really not. Sometimes we only have 10% overlap or even 80% overlap, but that 20% overlap, we can refer to each other, then everybody's working in their best space at their best time, and the user benefits from our collaboration. So that is where the networking web came from. I actually came back to Calgary in about 2006, started out in websites, didn't want to go back and work 9 to 5, couldn't do that again. So started out in websites, went into SEO, and then the social media thing started, and it just seemed interesting. It was always so captivating and constantly changing. But the code of our content doesn't change. It's still important to reach our audience. It's still important to meet them where they are before we ask them to follow us where we want them to go. And as long as we're asking questions and seeking how they're doing and finding out what their needs are today, which is very different from where it was even 2 years ago, then that part doesn't change.
Wow. We're evolving extremely fast, and I love how you brought in meeting them where they are.
Yes.
Why do you personally, Catherine, feel that communication is important, whether it's in your business, personal, any relationship that you want to build?
I'm going to start off with at the beginning, and again, long story. I'll do my best to keep it short. I found out at an early age that I was a severe dyslexic, and that's because communication was so difficult. Now it was in French initially, but English in the home. But school was difficult. But I was in school full time in French. English was even more difficult to read, and then with testing, that it's severe dyslexia, not just dyslexia. And I saw that as this terrible burden. But later, I call it, it was the kryptonite. But later, I discovered that this dyslexia was actually a superpower, because if I worked with it a certain way, if I did certain practices, if I followed different rules, because everybody has a set that's going to work for them, but I had to follow a different set. And there were fewer people who did it. But if I followed this, I had a different way of communicating with people visually, orally. I could use concepts rather than words, and that helped move conversation along. And I think that gave me an advantage, because many people who never had that block, they say, this is what I can offer for all of you wonderful people. But they're using language that they know, and they're not using the language that their users are using. Their users they'll say, I need more sales. Well, they need sales, but what's the problem? Where is the breakdown? And they don't necessarily know what the breakdown is. And if you can say, hey, I help you with this wonderful breakdown, and they don't recognize it, you're speaking about the same thing, but you're not using the right language, so they don't recognize you as someone who can solve the problem. So that's where I come in and make sure that that language is the same. It's not only in words, it's visual, it's conceptual, and it's moving that full user, what they call the customer journey, from set to end. And I'm not only the only person here. I often refer, because somebody else is going to do another section better than myself.
Thank you so much for sharing that beautiful piece of you and how it's a superpower. Because I feel so often it's easy to get in the zones of the different things we have, that it's different and it can be a problem. And we don't talk enough about how it's exactly the thing that we are and we need. And it's a beautiful and rewarding piece that can help bring more color and more spirit to those around us and whatever we're working in. So thank you. I love that.
My pleasure. Thank you.
You have on your website, which I think is fabulous, different ideas for content that you can place on social media. That anyone, and we'll put the website down below, that's Catherine's website, so that you can go and take a look. She has a lot of beautiful and amazing things that she's up to in the world with her business. What are some of the specific areas that you specialize in?
I will say it's going to be relaunched in 30 days. So it is in this holding pattern, and it's not quite ready yet, but there will be a beautiful one in 30 days. But in the meantime, people need to know that that things don't have to be as difficult if you have the right tools. So I have some free tools on the website, how to start a conversation, specifically LinkedIn, that's where I work. But how to just talk to somebody and just get that thing started, because they can choose to be non-receptive, but most people are receptive. But it's not just about connecting, no matter what social platform you're onto. You want to start that conversation. So there's something there for that. For other people, they're well into their content. They're well in, but they're stuck in this microcosm and they don't know how to take it elsewhere. So I have 101 content idea generators. So just look at your content in the form of mathematics and we'll break it out. And that might sound really weird, but can you see a math formula? In marketing math, I have this little tiny program. It's like, how can you break down what you do into a formula? And if you can break it down in a formula, then you can expand it again in language that's not your own. So, you can take it down. And then, are there sayings from people quotes from other people that talk about what you do, but only in one context. And have you thought to position your own content that way? And it might sound weird, but it's a great way of looking at, I could write a blog about this. If I could write a blog, then I can create a social media post. If I create a social media post, I can create a video content series. It starts with that spark, and then you just move it out. So that's what that content generator is. I have my LinkedIn courses and workshops, and that's all there too. And there will be a series of videos and blogs that will be starting probably, honestly, in November. That's just to help people look at, they don't need to have a huge big picture. Let's just fix one thing. Let's find one thing that we can improve, and then here are some steps to improve that one piece. So those are the pieces that they're going to find there. Yes, it all has to do with social media and content, but again, if we work at the conceptual level, you can see all the different directions that can work, and then reaching different target audiences or micro audiences that are in those points of spheres of influence.
I love that you brought in how content can be very fun and creative, and you can expand yourself all the time. Do you find yourself, Catherine, being a business owner, using pieces of your logical left brain and having moments of switching over to your right brain where creativity flows and energy moves?
Yes, and thank you for bringing that up, because any dyslexics that are out there, that idea generation, that's where our brain is typically set. The good news about that is you have all this great content all the time and it's flowing. The bad news about that is there's no off switch. There might be a dimmer with some of us, but there's no off switch, and it's really hard to organize. So you have to put that aside and then go to the left brain. Then there's systems, the systems and the processes. And this is where I had to learn. I had to work with people to teach me how to do it, because it felt foreign. But now that I know how to do it, it's great. But the problem with people who fit here naturally is it's very difficult for them to come up with ideas. They can take an idea and put it through the system and the processes, but generating doesn't always work easily. So if you have a partner who is the opposite of you, that's great, because you can bounce it off each other. When you're alone, you give yourself an hour or an evening or a day or a week to be creative and get all those ideas. What could we do? And then you have to trigger, there's no off switch, but you can trigger the dimmer and then move into the systems and processes. These are the ones that are important. I'm going to focus on these. And there are steps that you can take to help you do that. And then you put it through, it's almost like a checklist. Then I'm going to do this piece. Then I'm going to do that piece. It keeps you focused. It keeps you absolutely engaged, so that you can take those great ideas, but do something with them that's going to either help your business, help someone else's business, sell those books, whatever that happens to be, whatever that desire is in you. You can use both, and one person can do both.
Is there a specific day that you each week sit down and say, this is my day to come up with creative ideas, and you show up consistently to that day? Or what does that look like for you?
For me, it's the opposite. The creativity, like I said, it's nonstop. So I don't have to do that one. But when it comes to systems and processes, I have a flip chart. And I have, I wish I had it here. It's what artists use to paint or draw their charcoal. They're huge sheets. And I build my funnels. And I play funnels, like if I were to do it differently, this is what it would look like. And I'm using single words or very short sentences with an image that takes it through. This is what I would do with this idea. And then those other 8 ideas would also flow the same way. So I have to do that away from my desk, standing up, usually pacing back and forth in the kitchen, and then I draw, or it's kind of like stick figure, ugly images, but I can read them, and that's my process, because that's what's foreign for me. And I imagine for those that are thinking in content or in creativity, maybe that's what you need to do as well, is you step away from where you're naturally systematized and you go away and you create content. I know a few people who work like this, and it is very useful because when you come back to your natural desk, you go back to your creative mode. For me, anyway.
That is so fascinating. I'm listening to you, and having ADHD, it took a while, like a long while, to teach myself how to sit and do one task at a time. Because I had a lot of ideas. I had a lot of things I was used to doing all at the same time, but would never finish any of them. And so like teaching myself, as you're saying, it's a whole process of showing up to something that's unfamiliar, but reteaching yourself how to take it like one step at a time, or sit down and do this hour as for you to plan out, because it's not normal for what you are used to doing.
That's right. And ADHD and dyslexia often work hand in hand. What many of us have both. And then there are others where maybe they weren't consulted, or they weren't diagnosed with one or the other, but often some of the same tips that really help one will help the other. So if you feel like this is you, give it a try, just see if it works.
With business and life, there are always beautiful moments of failure and success. What is one of the failures that you've personally gone through as you are moving into creating the networking web?
I had I'll share one of the first ones. I had built out a course, and I wasn't listening because I knew what people needed. I knew we're going back quite a few years now, 7 years. I knew what people needed. I knew how to build this. I built out my little funnel, not as well as I do today, but I built it out, and people weren't coming to that particular course because I told them what they needed without listening to what they needed, because I knew best. But that was not what they needed to hear. That was not. And the funny thing is, the end result would have been great, but if I had put everything in terms the way they needed to hear it. And the biggest issue today, honestly, was you're throwing a whole course and it's like 50 weeks. Now, some people are ready for that, but they're not starting out that way. They need smaller pieces today. We have so much on our plate. And I wasn't thinking about smaller pieces, finish one thing, then work on the next. It was, here it all is, this massive thing. You need this right now. And it just did not work. Whereas now it's smaller pieces. Let's fix one thing that you currently have that will make a difference. And then let's look for another. Some people who are used to working that way, they can come in, they can take time off, and they can work on bigger things. But this is the whole point of meet them where they are. If they're busy and they can't take a week off, then they can't take a week off. But if they have 4 hours, what can you do for them? 4 hours every Tuesday to make their life easier, easier going forward. And, sometimes that's going to be a little bit of entertainment. Sometimes that's going to be a certain work. Sometimes it's processes. Sometimes it's a tool or a resource they just didn't either have access to or didn't understand how to use it to their benefit. So,
I'm listening and watching you, like all the growth that you just shared with us too, of that failure taught you a lot for moving into the next step.
Yes.
So turning that around, what is one of your successes or huge milestones that you've been through within your business?
Well, this is a long-term thing that's happening right now. There is a show that I'm going to be putting on that may or may not be seen in 2021, but definitely in 2022. And while it's me and one person I'll be sitting across, there is an army of people behind the scenes who I learned something from each one of them, or they're giving me an hour of their time, or they're giving me an insight on how to make this thing grow. And that is I'm going to call that 14 years of building relationships with people here in Calgary, some other cities, that all of those relationships, and you take away an insight and then you apply it. And I think it's important to apply it right away. But I'm now that this is coming, people are asking me, what do you need to help this thing be successful? And that's because I've had those relationships. And it's not about extroverts versus introverts. We've not been able to go out for such a long time, or a good chunk of 2000, but just reaching out to a couple of people just to see how they're doing. When you have something that's coming together, they want to see you succeed. And I've always had a problem asking for help. And the great thing about them asking me if I need something, they say yes. But I'm going to ask you to not do what I did and not ask for any assistance whatsoever. Because I would have had this much earlier had I asked for assistance right away and not wait for them to offer. And if we're doing things for them, most people will absolutely turn around and do things for us. So building of those relationships over the years, but don't forget to check back on the people you haven't talked to in a little while. And that was the nice thing about COVID. There were always a couple of silver linings, is we had time to reach out to people you haven't seen in 10 years and just say, what are you doing now? What are you working on? And then maybe there's something I can show them how to put something online, but they're going to show me a tool that they worked on. And then we both walk away from that call more knowledgeable and able to tackle something.
That was a huge, beautiful nugget there, Catherine, of like sitting in the spaces we often just as humans get worried about reaching out and what people are going to think or not think by doing so. But you had brought in that people want to see us succeed. And I love that so much, because I believe firmly that that's the truth, that we're usually the hardest on ourselves, thinking that they don't.
That is true.
What do you love the very most about what you do?
What I love the most, there is something in the aha moment. We've all had them. It's like, aha, I know how that works. But trying to show somebody, and I'll take it. I've been a trainer for so many years, and people have caught on to things very quickly. But those that struggled a little bit, some that struggled a little bit more, and watching their face the moment that everything clicks into place, there is something magical about that moment, and you never get tired of them. You never get tired of seeing it. It's always that same magical journey of, now you understand what I understand. Now you can see the big picture that I've seen from the beginning, that they were only just able to see themselves fitting into it at that moment. And it doesn't matter if you're tutoring somebody in mathematics or you're showing them the piece of a funnel that they just couldn't see. How are they going to make money from this? How are they going to serve their audience when there's only one of them? And then they see, I can do this too. That is really exciting.
Absolutely agree with you. We're going to turn it to the inner child questions. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. First question, what is the oddest food combo that you've liked and tried, or you've just tried?
The honest or the weirdest?
The oddest.
Oddest.
The weirdest, yes.
Oddest. Okay. My dad was an adventurous eater, and one day he came home with chocolate-covered crickets. And it was crunchy. Yes, there was chocolate. And I've been very adventurous with my food, but that was definitely the oddest combination. And that was such a long time ago, but it has stuck with me ever since. So still the oddest.
Did you like it, or was it just you tried it and you're like, okay, that's interesting, we're not doing that again?
Well, I think it was more of the thought that it wasn't appealing. Mm-hmm. But honestly, it wasn't that bad if you took away what the main material was. It was just a crunchy, could have been just a chocolate-covered nut.
Without the visual and the mental.
Or actually, you know what it was more like? If you've ever tried chocolate-covered pretzels, I suppose that would be the small ones, not the thick chocolate, but the tiny little crunchy. I think that might have been the best texture suggestion. So if you can have a chocolate-covered pretzel, you can eat a chocolate-covered Grasshopper.
I love chocolate covered pretzels, so now I'm super intrigued. I probably will.
I don't even know where I got it. We were living in Montreal at the time.
Who were your role models growing up, and why?
Oh my goodness. Role models growing up. This is going to sound weird, but when I was really young, I had this idea in my head that Vincent Price was my grandfather. My grandfather had passed away, and there was Vincent Price in all the movies. And what people didn't realize is, and we're coming back to that. People in shows have variety shows, so we get to see the actors. And I mean, his movies were always so much fun. But as a person, he was an incredibly intellectual man. He talked about art and music and of course film, which I've always had a fondness for. But everything to be tackled was fun. And again, my grandfather, so I have to think the same way about life. Don't know where that came from. But if you're not finding something interesting and always looking towards the next project, because no matter what you're doing right now, there's something next. And if we're bogged down, and this is where I've been bogged down, is I'm not thinking about what's next. I'm only thinking about, oh, this thing that I have to do now. But if I'm thinking about what's next, I still have to do this thing, but we're looking past it. And that has been a great comfort to me. I know that sounds weird, but Vincent Price.
I'm always fascinated by other people's role models, and because it does definitely say a story about you and your own perspective. So thank you for sharing that with us.
Thank you.
What is your favorite way to communicate?
Way to communicate. I think I just came back from a retreat. And driving up with people through business or from a setting, and you see them in a different setting. You're looking ahead in the car, but you're talking and you don't stop. And you're in this different setting. And I know that sounds really weird, but you don't know each other all that well, and you're getting to build a bond because you're looking forward. And I've heard parents talk about sometimes the easiest conversations they had is when people are looking forward, driving in the vehicle. My husband played hockey when he was young, and his dad and him were in the car, and we've had this conversation there too. And it's a great communication. Twitter is fabulous on social media. I like those really quick quips that so many people can jump on, but you can also have your smaller groups. But there's nothing like getting together in person in a car, because you're changing that dynamic looking forward.
I love that. My oldest is 14, and she would rather have a long conversation. It reminded me of teenagers, me not staring at her. It feels more raw and vulnerable, like she's okay to share if someone's not looking right at her directly, and she'll open up and just tell me everything. Do you see that a lot with the clients that you work with, like different personalities of feeling more comfortable opening the door sometimes with looking at you, and some personalities where it's more, I want to talk to you, but maybe not face to face, more on the phone type of a communication?
There are a few people who want to be camera off. I'm actually meeting somebody pretty soon who is the same way. Cameras off, and the idea is just, my understanding is they get to be more reflective, and they feel like they can come from a deeper space within because they're not staring at my face. Me, I will do whatever the client wants to do. There is another group who prefer the phone call, and it's not so much self-conscious of how they look, but the distractions. So the phone, even unless of course you have your speaker phone on, it's going to capture all the pieces. So the idea is to just have it in. I'll just put in my earbuds and you hear nothing else. Now we have good mics, you and I, because of doing our shows and whatnot. But without a good mic, it's capturing all that sound. That's why we have to work with a good mic, because it's only pulling voice. It's avoiding or canceling. I think they call it canceling other noises out. Sorry, long question. That's a dyslexic mind bouncing around, but
You're perfect.
it is still, most people do prefer to look at you, especially if they don't know you. But once they do, it is distracting to look at someone's face. It can be. But during the last couple of years, for some people, that was the only interaction. So there were more people wanting cameras on than not. I've been on Zoom now for 7 years since they broke away from GoToMeetings. And most people on Zoom wanted cameras on once COVID started. But there's still a few people, too distracting. Let's just turn the cameras off.
That kind of goes back to what you said before of meeting people where they are, because we oftentimes don't think about even that conversation of why people choose different ways of communication at different times and for different reasons. Before we end today, Catherine, what advice can you give our listeners about living a creative and joyful life?
You have to, I still say there's two types. There's the people who are naturally creative and those that really struggle because they're more system oriented and they really struggle with creating ideas. So for those who are creative in ideas, I would say the best thing that they can do is try to narrow it down to what are you either going to love to do most or a fabulous project you can tackle, but don't take on all the ideas because nothing's going to get done. Pick some and write them down, or use a blackboard or a cover board, and if you tomorrow you found a better idea, then scratch out one of them. Like, have a place where I only have room for 3 big things, and keep them. Have some variety, but only 3, because then you're going to finish them. On the other side, if creating creative, that's the cat pushing the door open, sorry. No proper look on it. If on the other side they're having difficulty with the creation, it's nothing more than a muscle that needs to be used and practiced. So start with words if that's easier, or start with pictures. And if it's pictures only, then Pinterest has these beautiful boards. There are other resources out there. Just start bringing pictures in. What do you like? It's like, okay, out of all these 20 pictures I pulled in, I like this most. What is it about it that you like? Is it maybe the start of a course you're creating? Is it the start of a book you're going to write? And then you're just pulling more things. What's going to be in the book? What's going to be in a chapter? And you can start that way. If you're ready with words, write them down. Don't forget to date it, because you want to look at them. If you like pen and paper, and I think for people who are too systematic, that pen and paper or pencil and charts is an absolute great place to start, because they can flip and see how they've changed going from day to day. They will see within a pad, they will absolutely see a progression, and that is going to drive you forward to keep doing it.
That's beautiful advice. If you were a dessert, we're going to leave with this comment of, if you were a dessert and it was the very last, okay, now I'm trying to do 2 questions at the same time. So here's my ADHD part of me. So if you only had one dessert that you could eat, and that was the very last one, what would it be and why?
A creme brulee.
Ooh.
From a French chef in an Italian tiny town.
I'm like there right now, Catherine. Let's go get that treat. And if you were that creme brulee dessert, what would you name yourself?
Perfection. The dessert, not me. The dessert would be perfection.
Love it. Where can they find you if our listeners have any questions about what you're up to, business, or any comments about what we talked about today?
I am most on LinkedIn. And I'm always looking for content. I'm always looking for themes. I'm always looking for things that are changing. So you will find me there. But for those of you who know LinkedIn, sometimes you get a lot of messages and things get lost. So Twitter, not the DMs, but in Twitter, that's probably the next best place you can find me. Catherine Net Web. Name's too long for Twitter, so I use the pieces of the website. So Catherine Net Web, and then Catherine Saykaly-Stevens on LinkedIn.
Perfect. We will have those in the comments so it's easy access to Catherine. Thank you so much for being here with us. It has been an absolute delight to talk to you today.
And to you, Lauri, thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you for all of those who are watching us and will be watching on the replay. Remember, as you go about the rest of your week, that you are in your own hero's journey. What different ways do you want to show up within your life? What creations would you like to build? And remember that you are in charge and control of whatever choices and decisions that you want to make for a better life. Have a good rest of the day. We will see you next Monday right here at 1 o'clock p.m. Mountain Standard Time. Bye, guys.